to the Crypto Beat. My name is Tim Copeland. I'm the head of growth at The Block. Joining me today we have my co-host Kelvin Sparks and Manny Stotz, executive chairman of Ton Strategy. Welcome to the show. How are we both doing?
Thanks so much, Tim, and thanks, Calvin. Really appreciate being on the show.
Yeah, excited. This should be fun.
Awesome. Just a quick note before we get started. If you're hiring crypto, you should use Campus. It's a product we built. We've been using it internally for many years. It works really well. You want to hire real crypto natives, use Campus. Head to theblock.co/campus to get a 3-month free trial. Now, today's episode is about Telegram, Ton, and treasury companies. So before we get stuck in, Manny, can you give us a little bit about your background, what you do in sort of relation to Ton?
Sure. I'll try to keep that brief. I consider myself an entrepreneur, first and foremost, who happened to be an investor. I built my own investment firm called Kingsway Capital from basically zero to some like 5 billion over the last 15 years, based in London. We manage, long-term capital on behalf of institutional investors, mostly, U.S. University endowments and many Ivy League schools or institutional grade family offices. And actually my sort of TradFi focus has been from day one, frontier and emerging markets. And probably one of the biggest actually frontier and emerging market kind of equity investors. That means we don't do China, God forbid Russia, we have a bit of India and Brazil, but we're really big in Bangladesh and, parts of South and Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa, and CIS and LATAM. And, we've always had problems with the currency. And I didn't know what Bitcoin was, frankly, for the longest time. And but we did go into venture in sort of 2015, got into fintech, and then earnestly in crypto, sort of starting in, 2019 got interested, 2020 started investing, and we've never looked back. And basically, we started with Bitcoin, still my first love. Got a number of investments in that area, from mining to Lightning and lending and so forth. We got into blockchain gaming. I'm the biggest shareholder of a company called Animoca, which I'm sure you'll have heard of. I'm also on the board of blockchain.com. That was sort of slightly unusual for us. They were more later stage, but we kind of fixed the balance sheet problem that they had coming out of the 21, 22 sort of cycle. And then I actually became the biggest investor in Ton Coin first, starting in 2022 as well, sort of kind of in the middle of the bear market. And then I also have been serving on the Ton Foundation board since basically the same time for the last 3 years, and have been president from the beginning of this year until today, actually. I just was basically asked to choose between my new role, the executive chairman of Ton Strategy Co. The ticker is Verb on NASDAQ. I'm sure we're going to talk about that, or remaining the president of the Ton Foundation. And frankly, it was an easy choice. My job was largely done there. My job really was a non-exec to bringing an executive leadership team, which I've done. We have a co-founder of MoonPay, Max Crown, as the CEO, who's now been elevated, and really sort of defining the strategy and help executing on that strategy. And as you know, Ton is special for kind of 2 reasons in my mind. One, of course, is Telegram. We'll talk about that, and its native integration and distribution. But secondly, it's the only large layer 1 that is not yet available fully in the United States, the largest market in the world, right? And that is now changing, right? I mean, and my kind of role is to get that done. And this company, basically now listed on the NASDAQ, is the first time U.S. retail and institutional traditional finance investors can actually get exposure to Ton, and by extension to effectively Telegram, which, as you know, is a private company, not listed.
Yeah, it's interesting. It can be quite hard to get hold of Ton. At one point, I needed it for to test something, and I couldn't find a way to buy it. So I messaged someone I met at a former hackathon, who was I think by that point was the founder of Notcoin.
Yeah.
And I think I asked for $100. He sent me 100 Ton, and I was just like, what are you doing? And I sent it back. I was like,
yeah. But of course, on the flip side, right? This is all upside. I mean, the early bird catches the worm, right? And it will be made a lot easier. But by the time it's on Coinbase, it's on Robinhood, it's on Gemini, and it's in South Korea as well. We're not an upbit yet. You might be well served being there earlier. And of course, we also will make our contribution.
Yeah, cool. And then, so you touched on quite a few things there. So Kingsway, how much of would you say Kingsway have you focused on crypto, in a rough percentage?
Well, I mean, it started from 0 5 years ago to now over 50%. And I mean, look, and I've, of course, come for the profits and stayed for the prophecy, right? I mean, I've traveled everywhere, literally. We've been in probably the majority of countries in Africa on the ground, like as far-flung places as Sudan and other similar like frontier and emerging market countries. We own 1.5% of the Bangladeshi stock market, right? It's not a large market, right? But the point is, there's 3 billion people, right, who are effectively as bigger than India and China combined and growing, 3 to 5 billion, right? That's sort of the path, and they're all basically largely unbanked or underbanked, right? And they don't have the US dollar. They have the Zimbabwean dollar or something like that, right? But now they have smartphones, right? And they're using this to get out of, the Zimbabwean dollar. I've got $100 trillion in my pocket, but I'm sure you've seen them, into US dollar stablecoins, most popular perhaps. Bitcoin, ETH, Solana, Ton, everything is better than Zimbabwean dollar, right? The bar is pretty low. And, what we've, I guess, had sort of two insights is that at the nexus of crypto and these sort of exotic countries, we're finding all the real world use cases that exist in spades, right? The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. But the crypto penetration in some of these countries is like 40% and rising, right? If you look at Nigeria or Vietnam. And we're finding not only sort of local or regional, but kind of global winners emerge who are number one, unlikely to have a giant US and China competitor. I mean, that might change now with Trump, but historically, as you know, the superpowers had teething issues with blockchain. And we also, number two, are finding those global winners without, let's say a default China or US competitor ahead of Silicon Valley, right? As Silicon Valley is looking in the Philippines or places like this. And Ton is, of course, maybe the best example of that, right? Which we'll look forward to talk about today.
Okay, so you're saying you have more than like $2.5 billion of crypto exposure?
Yeah.
And is that primarily like Bitcoin, ETH, or like companies or Ton?
Because we came from the traditional finance world, it's been mostly equity investment. I mean, of course, I wish I could have, been, let's say, brave enough to just buy, for instance, Bitcoin and ETH and, tell my investors they should, enjoy the ride. While, of course, their response would have been they probably can do this themselves, even if they didn't or wouldn't. And, we manage, of course, capital, which is locked up. So it's long term. In more like VC style funds, and then also have a fee structure on it, right? So that's kind of been slightly harder to justify buying the, let's call them blue chips, right? But we've made equity investments in that space in significant size. And the largest single coin investment by a country mile has been Ton.
Okay, so it's Kingsway that you say was or is the largest Ton investor?
Yeah, I mean, now the company that we just kind of willed into existence has more coins than Kingsway does. But of course, Kingsway is the largest shareholder, and I'm effectively the executive chairman. So it's kind of all in the family. But yeah, I mean, we are, and it's of course public information that we're in good company, right? We have, Sequoia, Benchmark, Ribbit, and many other like leading sort of, especially US sort of fintech crypto investors. And the firm that got me into this, they want to stay a little bit anonymous, but let's just say they're one of the biggest backers of Elon. They're also very big in Ton, also very big in Verb. And yeah, so very, very excited about the co-investors as well, right? But yeah, we are, I've been diagnosed with a viral sort of disease. It's called tunnel vision, right? Yeah.
And then you're talking about like 558 $million of Ton. Where is it? Are you saying you've already purchased all of it?
Well, we've still got cash, right? But we do have let's say a ton of Ton already. Yes, yeah. We're actually gonna try to. It's a public company, so I got to be a little bit careful what I say before things get. But let's say tomorrow we are trying to pre-market actually U.S. market open, releasing a NAV statement hopefully, and that will give you the full detail. And there is a pipe presentation somewhere you can dig it up. But yeah, it's a ton of Ton. Yeah.
Okay.
But there's more to come. Of course, we are perpetually buying it. Like.
Yeah, and where are the main sources that you're buying it from?
Well, we'll in the beginning, in order to get this off the ground, we bought some discounted Ton with a lockup structure. But in the future, we're just going to buy spot, right? Because we think really, of course, the existing also holders of Ton ought to be the main beneficiaries of this. And it's for me, like launching one of these digital asset treasury companies is a bit like making a bottle of wine. Like there needs to be, the majority needs to be cash, right? And then some in kind is maybe fine. especially to get what's called sort of an attractive MNAV to get the pipe investors into the cap table. But basically the goal is to buy spot more or less perpetually, of course funded by raising capital, in all likelihood just common equity. Of course, we're not ruling out anything else categorically, but let's say we're ruling out hard financial leverage. Yeah.
So did you purchase any from Kingsway?
No, of course not. No. Kingsway, the opposite, put in and cash and ton in. Yeah. We've increased our net exposure substantially in doing so, basically.
Yeah. Okay. And then how did you get involved with Ton in the first place?
As I said, I was introduced to Ton by a long-term, I'm like the second or third penguin, I would guess, of the, new Ton. I was not involved in crypto at all, let alone, we talked about it briefly earlier, right? In the sort of 2017-18 episode, when there was something called Gram, which is sort of Ton's predecessor. But yeah, let's say a longtime friend of Pavel Durov and big investor in Ton, who also is one of the biggest backers of Elon, basically convinced me this is worthy to look into. And I, of course, agreed.
I was actually kind of curious about the light bulb moment. If you could speak a bit more to what was like the aha in your mind, being like, okay, Ton is an attractive and investable asset.
I mean, I'm a simple mind, right? Like in my mind, it all starts with the people, the founder, the jockey, right? Look, credit where credit is due. I mean, Pavel Durov, right, might be the GOAT, the greatest of all time in his specific domain, which is social media, messaging, and product, right? He's the only living human being who's not only built an app that 1 billion people use every month. There's maybe 5 others, but the only one of those who owns 100% of that app, right? And the first billion is the hardest, right? In my experience, right? So 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion, maybe 4 billion. That's sort of the plan. Meta today has 400 product managers. I understand Zuckerberg is not one of them. Telegram's got 1 product manager, and it's Pavel Durov himself. He doesn't even drink caffeine, let alone alcohol. That man is on a mission, right? And apart from being perhaps the world's best product manager, he's also, I think, someone who has proven to do what I would call the right thing, which means often to put your own interest below the greater good, at great personal cost, by the way. And of course, we can talk about what's going on today, right? But, as you know, he basically had to sort of flee Russia. He has effectively survived assassination attempts and is currently more or less, it's a first world prisoner, let's say, in a political prisoner in France, right? And of course, you can travel to Dubai. But, he has basically chosen to do the hard way and not sell out his user base. And I think that's very admirable, right? And I think, of course, don't let sort of perfect be the enemy of the good. I'm also here to criticize Pavel and certain things, but he's generally been extremely unique, right, as a founder, like Elon level good, right, and hard to find, hard to even partner with, right? So that's number one, right? Secondly, we have such an unfair competitive advantage, right? If you kind of have the messenger on your side, it's not a fair fight, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from, I don't know, Vitalik at Ethereum. He's a genius and has pioneered a lot of this work, right? And I'm a huge, Ethereum bull and fan. I'm also not looking at this competition, right? And equally, Anatoly at Solana, right? Executed extremely well, especially in the light of the, sort of FTX fallout. I take my hat, right? Tremendous execution, especially on the developer side, right? But, right, if you look at the jockey, right, sort of the team, the founders, our Russians might be even smarter, harder working, more committed than Vitalik and Anatoly, who are also Russians, by the way, ethnically at least, right? Number 2, we've got a nuclear weapon called Telegram. They don't, right? And of course, we're cooperating with those guys, right? And I think, again, it will be sort of horses for courses, but ultimately, I think everything will get bigger, right? I think, I said this sort of earlier, like, I think this could well play out a bit like the Fangs or Magnificent 7, as we call them now. And I can't tell you whether it's, 5 or 7, right? But likely will be a handful of crypto protocols which have the potential at least to become trillion-dollar protocols, right? I mean, Bitcoin's there 2 trillion, right? Going higher in my mind, right? Ethereum should be there by now, and I think we'll get there next, but that will be about 2.5x from here. Maybe Toli gets there first, wish him luck. There'll be like a 10x from here, but Ton is a fraction of either the size of Ethereum. I think Ethereum is 50 times bigger than Ton last time I checked, and Solana maybe 12 times bigger than Ton. So if you believe, right, which I do, that Ton is in that club, you got to take a look at this, right? And also you can look at sort of the performance, right? I think there's at least 3 reasons why sort of, Ton has probably underperformed, which are very easily explained and are basically being rectified, right? Number one is, altcoins overall have underperformed. I think for two reasons. One is that, we didn't have the institutional bid, right? The ETF, but also the treasury companies, right? I mean, Saylor had an impact and his disciples, right? Now we have the treasury companies in, Ethereum, we've seen a bit of an impact, and Ton just getting started, right? And of course, also there's lots going to happen in Solana, which we're excited about. Now, secondly, all of the new money into crypto has largely come from the US, and Ton is not available yet in the US. We just talked about how hard it is to buy it, right? Let's assume that's changing, right? The treasury company launched this month, the wallet last month, and there's a few more blanks to fill out, but we're working hard on it, right? And so I think when you look at this, right, sort of, it could be the $1 trillion animal hiding in plain sight, right? I'm not sure what we call them, decacorn, unicorn, and also I come from TradFi, right? And I've seen, for instance, some of the from emerging markets, like the best tech investment ever made actually was not Silicon Valley. It was Tencent. Zhang Lei from Hill House, right? I'm sure you've heard that name. Like in 2004 or 5, bought like, I think $30 million of Tencent. Didn't keep all of it, but now he's the second biggest asset manager in Asia after SoftBank, right? And how did, Naspers, right? Legacy media company from beautiful Cape Town, South Africa. They put 30 million into Tencent, and that turned into a $180 billion stake, 6,000x, and like it took 15 years, but still, right? And Tencent became Asia's most valuable corporation. How? You had WeChat in the middle, right? The messenger, then all the financial applications, granted no blockchain, but of course payments. I mean, payments in China, mobile payments are like 200% of GDP, right? Dwarfing Visa and Mastercard globally, right, in terms of its size. And it's really become a super app, right, which we don't have in the West, not yet. I mean, Elon's working on it. X is, I think, with XAI on path to become a super app. Also, will have crypto integration. But Telegram's got 50% bigger user base than X and has already got blockchain integration, right? So if you kind of zoom out, this is really, I think, in terms of the stars aligning, I've rarely seen this. Such a world-class proven team. We've done it once with also VK before, biggest social network in Europe still. Done it twice with Telegram. Can we do it with Ton? I think so. Going after such a prize with such an unfair competitive advantage, right? So that was kind of the aha moment. Yeah, and we're so early in the journey still.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I concur. Could you speak to some of the hurdles as to why there hasn't been a super app in the West and why Ton is kind of positioned to be that in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, look, also Zuckerberg, of course, tried to do this, right? And I guess he's not been allowed. We can debate why that is, right? I mean, and he will, of course, try to come back in with, I mean, it was Libra, DM Novi. Now it's probably going to be some sort of, Meta stablecoin is my guess, right? I'm not close to it, but, there's been headlines. But of course, they're also busy with AI. And by the way, it wouldn't at all shock us, right? I think, but, it shows you the size of this, right? So, if you're Zuckerberg sitting at a 1.9 trillion market cap today, it's kind of hard to move your needle. He thought this can, right? And so don't take my word for it. This could be a $1 trillion idea, right? And look, I think, the internet in the West has just developed slightly differently, right? And we had, a different set of regulation. As you know, in China, they have basically firewalled the whole thing. So the relative market share of the Chinese internet giants, whether it's Tencent or Baba, is orders of magnitude bigger than the Western ones. You think Amazon is big, it is, right? But like, as a percentage of e-commerce market share, Baba is much bigger within China, right? It's sort of like oligopoly, monopoly type of situations, right? And but yeah, I think we also have had probably less leapfrogging, right? I mean, again, I'm an emerging market investor. I mean, people don't know this, right? But there's like $1 trillion of what's called mobile money in the world. SMS, Rails, M-Pesa, Safaricom, 80% sits in Africa, right? And it's all shilling or like local fiat, right? I mean, that will be eaten up, right? We're so early still. And my point is, so I think we're, gonna see actually more, we can learn a lot more maybe, at least at times from, the Eastern internet than we can learn from the Western internet to understand the future, especially when it comes to blockchain. Of course, with the big difference that China didn't have it.
And when you're sort of investing in Ton sort of in its early days, was it difficult when there was the lawsuit against it? For instance, like when it was essentially blocked from having its own cryptocurrency and it had to sort of like separate out the cryptocurrency and have it all run separately. Like, were you at all like worried during those times, or did you just have, just faith in the team throughout?
I was spending there, say, wasting my time, still trying to make money in fiat TradFi land, right? So I was not involved back then. But of course, I've heard the story, from first-hand accounts many times. But yes, of course, this was a, you could argue somewhat existential moment, right? And I think one of the mistakes perhaps were to, what the Brits would say, ask for permission rather than begging for forgiveness. So I understand what Telegram did. They had Sked and Arps doing the docs and consulted all the regulators, and some other people just didn't do that. Like EOS just launched, right? And they settled with the SEC and still walked away with 100,000 bitcoins. So I think and the result of which was maybe a much better outcome, right? Because it was the classic ICO at the time, where the messenger itself was issuing a token, and then when this was abandoned and everything was settled, the project was open sourced. And Pavel is a pretty good game theorist, so he wanted to see if the community picks it up and keeps it alive, and they did. There were a couple of forks from the original Gram. Ton is the only relevant one in my mind. And then, of course, the SEC settlement expired. That was 2023. Trump won the election, so the winds have changed. And now, of course, Telegram's integrating with Ton, but it's a much more, I think, decentralized effort than it had been in the beginning, which, of course, much more in line with the ethos of the industry and crypto.
Yeah. And you talk about how Telegram's size is a really big positive for Ton's, potential. Do you think it also serves as somewhat of an upper limit in terms of, let's say you've got, if you have like Aave on Ethereum, it's very agnostic to any sort of application. Anyone might choose to integrate it. You might see any sort of, platform offer like, lending rewards or something. Yeah. Whereas when you have like a coin that's tied like very directly to one singular product, you might find like it gets less integration outside of that product.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think on a net basis, I think clearly Telegram is a net positive for Ton, right? But it's not just only gross positive and no net negatives, I would say. On the positives are sort of obvious, right? Content is king, but distribution is the queen, and she's wearing the pants, right? At least in my household. But the challenges arise. And also just to clarify, because that's an important point. While Telegram is exclusively partnering with Ton, which means Telegram couldn't do the same deal with Solana or Ethereum. Ton could do a deal with X or Reddit or anyone else, right? And as you might have seen, there were some exchanges, let's say, between the software goat Pavel and the hardware goat Elon, right? Which I can't say too much about, but let's just say they're in touch. And so I think the view is that I think the bigger challenges is that while Telegram is very well known, Ton isn't, and I think Ton is actually quite misunderstood. There's been a lot of questions. So is Telegram really committed to it? Is it really financially aligned with it? Is Pavel really behind it or not? Right? And I think those we'll try to dispel those misunderstandings quite forcefully. And you'll see a bigger, and this is part of it, like sort of education campaign, especially as Ton come to the US, right? Is going to be necessary. I think we've done a very poor job as a whole as an ecosystem to tell the story. And I'm also blaming Pavel, like, if he's not telling the story, like, good enough, like, who can expect me to do it better? I don't know. I'm trying my best. But I think another challenge comes with this a bit like, what I admire about Ethereum and Solana, because they kind of came from nothing sort of thing, they had been more scrappy at the beginning. And, we are sort of almost our own biggest enemy. It's like, oh, we are Telegram, we have already won it. That's not true. It's not true. It's not at all. Right. And I think so that's perhaps, I think, actually the biggest drawback, I would say. And I think I'm also particularly unhappy what we've done in the developer ecosystem, like not enough, clearly, especially compared to others, but even on an absolute basis, right? Look, I think we're decent in the developer ecosystem east of Berlin, right? But that's not good enough, right? And I'm also counting the WeChat devs, which is actually quite important, right? But in Asia, but west of Berlin, we're nowhere, right? And that needs to change. And of course, should change now as Ton is coming in earnest into the US for the first time proper.
Yeah, that was actually cool.
Stani's a friend, like, where I wouldn't be shocked if he wants to launch on. I mean, everyone wants to add another zero to their user base, I guess, right? And everyone wants to see mass adoption. If Telegram and Ton can't bring mass adoption in crypto, I don't think anyone else can, right? I mean, this is really important for the whole industry. And of course, it's also the open network, right? I mean, in our, the wallet that is sadly only available in the self-custodial form in the US due to regulation still, is of course also available in a custodial fashion outside the US. And you can buy Aave, you can buy Ethereum, you can buy Bitcoin, like, and again, where I think every chain is sort of their superpower, right? And even like I would go further, right? What you're now seeing is, quite recently, Tether launching Plasma, right? A dedicated chain for a specific use case around Tether and stablecoins. Of course, Coinbase has Base, and even Stripe is launching Tempo, I think it's called, right? Now Ton is already there, right? so I think there's going to be similar questions that we already have answered, right? How to manage a chain that is tied to a very large existing player, but still make it decentralized in a way that it's not just exclusive to that player; it can also integrate with all the others.
Yeah, it was pretty cool actually seeing that pop up on the US side of things. Just randomly one day, you see the headline, you look at, no way, I would have got like a notification on my app or something. You open it up, boom, sure thing. There's a new wallet application. And when you go to buy, it's funny. It's like, no, not like $25, $30, like no, $300 straight up. Let's get in the Ton ecosystem. So it's pretty fun UX, just clicking through and getting a chance to actually play around with that live.
Yeah, it's still clunky, of course. Again, the on-ramps are still missing. But again, like you can imagine what's being fixed. I mean, I can
it's beautiful visually, though. Yeah, it paints a nice picture.
Coinbase Ventures just announced investment in Toncoin. Maybe I'll leave it at that. And so, yeah, I think this is sort of, we're trying to do our best to, make it easy and also accessible, frankly, and now explaining why this is exciting and for your audience, frankly, right?
Let's see. So one thing that I was kind of curious about actually focused now more so I guess on the Telegram lens was why do you think mini apps are better than dApps? Because personally, I will say I think it's called like Cat T, basically like do the matching game, whatever. It's one of the few crypto apps or I guess crypto adjacent applications that I actually have gone on to play over time just because it's stimulating. You have the flashing lights, the sound effects. It's just unlike most crypto apps I've ever played around, they're crypto adjacent things. So just curious what your thoughts are there on the superiority of mini.
I mean, look, I'm not a very technical person, right? So a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. That's what I have, right? But I understand, again, this is very similar to what happened in WeChat, that you have the mini app platform. And I think roughly half of Telegram's user base, so call it 500 million MAUs, are using mini apps, is, just allowing for a more seamless UI and UX, right? And that's really what Pablo is all about. He's all about product, right? I mean, this has really also been the problem of crypto in my mind, right? Look, I love crypto, but do I want to have a bunch of seed phrases flying around everywhere and have a, MetaMask wallet and pay gas fees and bridge to this chain? And no, I kind of want to press buttons and expect it to work the way I use the internet. If I or my mother uses the internet, right, which she does, she doesn't know which protocol and care which protocol is running in the background, right? Is it HTTPS? Is it, Linux, TCP/IP? You press buttons and it works, right? So here you just talked about, right? Hop into your Telegram, link to your wallet, right? Hop into a game, billion users, link to your wallet, right? So 1 click, 2 clicks, right? Not like 15 loops and so forth. And I think that's really what's been missing, right? And it can't be 10% better than what we had. It needs to be 10 times better, right? And it kind of creeps up on you, right? WhatsApp crept up on us, right? Like suddenly everyone was on it, right? And so I think the network effects shouldn't be underestimated, especially in the long term, right? I mean, this is sort of gradually then suddenly in my mind.
So then I guess curious if you could speak to the path to monetization, obviously, since it seems, or it's very apparent distribution is Ton's like superpower. Yeah. So what does that look like for these
correct. I mean,
developers?
Yeah, so look, I think we're trying to be the sensible part of the crypto industry without any disrespect to all the fun and games over there, right? My point is, I come at this from, again, the global poor and unbanked, right? What do they want, right? Number one, they want a dollar account in their pocket, right? Stable coins. Okay, we have Tether. We launched Ethena, FDUSD, and let's assume the biggest sort of American soil stablecoin is coming next, right? And then, the reality is, right, people don't want to they want to buy stablecoins, not because they want to get a yield or like just they want to get poor, right? Basically, and then the next thing is probably the dollar with the yield, right? Ethena is a good example, USDE. Ultimately, the yield will more likely come from real world assets as well, right? Which of course is more scalable. In China, they had this too. They called it the Digital Money Market Fund. Very Chinese names, like the Tencent one was called Leftover Treasure, where you have like, a little bit of leftover cash in your checking account, sweep it over, right? And it's daily liquidity, right? The next also, again, as sort of, sound money people, we want, we've just launched gold, like Tether Gold, right? Which is an elitist store of value in the West, right? To get the London LME, whatever gold price, you need to be rich, right? Even if you buy jewelry, there's a fraction of the value is the gold. The other fraction is the marginal for the jeweler and distribution, right? Now you can buy, gold on chain and have it in your self-custody wallet, all on the Tom blockchain. Same with Bitcoin, TGBTC, right? Again, as you know, Bitcoin layer 1, sadly, is not built for 3 billion unbanked people. And the UTXO set isn't, big enough. Even Lightning, I'm one of the biggest investors in Lightning in the world. Sadly, not yet anyone really using it. It's not ready for prime time, right? But I think, let's start there. And then, of course, DeFi, right? I mean, the stable coins forms the basis for DeFi, whether that's, borrowing lending, of course, yield farming, and of course, trading as well, but also payments and remittances, right? I mean, there's $1 trillion of remittances of the world, right? And Telegram sits on both sides of the corridor, right? Whether it's US and Mexico or, by US and India or UK and Pakistan, right? And so that's going to be really interesting. I think payments could, what happened in China was all became QR codes, right? Why not, right? I mean, online or offline, every corner shop in Africa can have a QR code with a, a smartphone, right, with a Telegram, and you can scan it. And so I think this is sort of like how we think about it. And of course, gaming. And look, I'm a huge believer, again, as one of the biggest investors in, Animoca, right? I mean, we have a thesis that, gaming is, I think, the most obvious application for the technology, digital property rights, for two reasons. One is size, 3.2 billion gamers, bigger than film and music combined and growing, 150 unicorns without blockchain. But the second reason is that it's the product market fit, i.e. people already have been doing it, i.e. spending tens of billions of dollars a year on virtual goods without, of course, blockchain, without property rights. And I think, doing it with property rights on the blockchain is better than without. And yes, there is no, of course, a way around making these games really, really fun and really, high quality. But I think that's happening, and it just happens with a lag. And I think, again, Telegram is widely well positioned. So I mean, Ton should become one of the biggest change for, at least for the B2C side or peer-to-peer side for stablecoins in the world. I think Ethereum will always be better from the, I'm an institutional investor, right? Like, would I put institutional money, which we have, right? We have a ton of Ton into Ton DeFi? No. Would I put it on Aave? Yeah, I would, right? And but it doesn't mean there's a mass adoption use case for consumers, right? And also for gaming, I think it should become the biggest chain for blockchain gaming. So, I mean, you've seen this already with these tapping games, which of course is not where we end up, but it's where we started. You could have added 1-0 to everything that happened before. The 2021 cycle, Axie Infinity, reached, I think, peaked at 2.7 million MAUs in 21, was valued at 45 billion for 1 minute, which is kind of nuts. And, you could have, I mean, Notcoin 40, 50 million, and then you had, Catizen and Dogs and Hamster, like, and so this is, again, just the beginning of this. And I think, again, really, really, really exciting.
Yeah, it was interesting because around this time last year, it seemed like the Ton Foundation's focus was on DeFi and meme coins. You spoke to a bit about how that's changing looking forward, but are there any things in particular outside of stable coins? It's almost like having that chat GPT right now that you're super excited for.
Sorry, Calvin, I didn't want to cut you short. Quite excited. So look, I was on the board, and so of course I take the blame for not being as front-footed as I should have been. But I only became president kind of at the beginning of this year, right? And I think the focus on DeFi is, of course, DeFi is, I think, part of the entire ecosystem, right? So we definitely need to be having it. At the same time, the chain architecture has been designed primarily for scalability and speed. But, if there was a design choice to be made between scalability and speed, Nikolai Durov, Pavel's brother, maybe the best mathematician, computer scientist, and cryptographer of his generation, should look him up, he's kind of nuts, opted for scalability. Why? I mean, obviously, Telegram has, hundreds of millions and ultimately billions of users, and it needs to support that mass adoption. But also, if you think forward, AI agents on chain, we might have more than humans eventually, right? And I think that is going to serve Ton in good stead, right? But it's not as fast as Solana, and probably will never be quite as fast as Solana. If Solana is the fastest single shard, this is a multi-sharding architecture, right? And that's important for DeFi, especially for meme coin trading, right? And taking the old sort of Jack Welch view of the world, you should only be, really doing something with a huge amount of focus where you can be number one or maybe number two in the world at. But if you can be number four, like why bother? Solana's got what, 96% global market share in meme coin trading. And that's great. But I don't think that will be the biggest use case until the end of time of blockchain technology, right? But so that was my sort of criticism, and I think that's we're not de-emphasizing it at all. I just think that we're not, we have so many unique superpowers that are well. Why don't we use those and focus on the stuff we're really really well class at? If you want to win any game, sports or investing, you have to be a good athlete, but you have to also choose the game that's most stacked in your favor, right? And yeah, I think DeFi, again, we're not as fast. It's getting faster, but as not as robust. But I think it's going to be absolutely important to have a solid, healthy, robust DeFi ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most interesting things that kind of was not really spoken out loud by at least Telegram and Ton was how there's almost this huge lane given that you seem to overtake Proton Mail. And maybe it's because I'm just like a crypto dinosaur that I didn't hear a lot of people talking about that. It was almost like I woke up maybe in like 2023 one day. It's like, oh, nobody's using Proton Mail. It's all via Telegram. So the fact that it's almost ubiquitous in the crypto stack is interesting to see how that then is monetized by Ton. So yeah, just wanted to highlight that before I pass it back to Tim.
Yeah, I mean, on the monetization, right? I mean, of course, freedom isn't free. The mission has to be financed, right? But Pavel, right, as I mentioned, has even more pure than Elon, right, resisted the temptation to even raise equity in order not to be ever put under pressure by an equity investor to monetize in what he would consider the unethical way, right? He would never want to violate your privacy, take all your private data, mine it with the AI, sell it to the highest bidders, including all the governments, I'm sure the other guys are doing, showing you invasive ads, right? No, he's chosen to do the harder, arguably more honest and noble ethical way, subscription, voluntary, right? I mean, the base product's pretty good, clearly, but there's 16 million people now, including myself, who pay something like $10 a month for more features and so forth, right? He's done a non-invasive ads platform, actually put on Ton rails. Ton has all these B2B use cases within Telegram. If Telegram is like, I mean, I would always joke that Balaji doesn't take it far enough, right? It's not the network state, it's the network continent, right? I call it Satorica. I can explain why America is called America if your American audience might be interested to learn about that. But the point is, this is like the national currency of Telegram, right? So the developers are paid in Toncoin. You can buy your username. I mean, imagine how valuable the usernames will be, right? I mean, how many Peters and Sarahs and Alis are there in the world? I own Manny, right? And then you can buy these anonymous phone numbers, all pay in Ton. And our Telegram gifts is huge. You might have seen that. Snoop Dogg and many other celebrities are queuing up there. And so the point is that there's an endless sort of stream of monetization opportunities, but it also needs to be understood how financially aligned Telegram is with Ton. Pavel's also done a bond, as you know, in order to retain 100% ownership. But Ton is by far the most important piece of the entire global monetization puzzle for all of Telegram. And so plan A is Toncoin, B and C is also Toncoin. Plan D is like refining the debt, but I think IPO is only plan F, right, or something like this. And the point is, never in the history of capitalism has $1 trillion animal come out of only ever US or China, right? So I think there's also a little bit of a personal, how should I put it, ambition there. He's a quite competitive guy, yeah, and at 5 billion supply, that pegs it at $200 a coin, right? And cut that in half twice, but it's still worth taking a look at.
Cool. Now, something I've sort of wondered for a while is, will Telegram ever sort of expand its sort of offering to go into sort of more of a full stack social media platform? For instance, I mean, it has pretty much most of the crypto community on there, but it's pretty much essentially DMs and group chats. I wondered, is it ever going to get into essentially public posts like Twitter, and sort of expand sort of that way?
Look, I of course can't speak for Telegram or Pavel. Only he can do that himself. But I can share my perspective, right? I think the difference, and I think there's actually quite a lot of similarities with X, right? And again, let's just say the founders are pretty philosophically aligned, and I think they realized that free speech on the internet, First Amendment for a reason, is important, and it's really the basis for all the other freedoms if you really think about it, right? Voluntary exchange and privacy and even property. Property is the freedom to exclusively use it, right? One of the founding fathers said that property rights and freedom of speech are actually quite inextricably linked, right? But the difference is, I think it's a different product. X is a public space. So when you go on X, you don't necessarily see your buddies that, or your whatever girlfriend or wife, you see like famous people or people you follow, right? Telegram is a private space. So you have private chats with people, right? And of course, that's the first difference, right? And people of course have these big channels and groups, but there's no one with like 100 or 200 million followers. Like I think Pavel's public channel has maybe 11 million, and there's bigger ones, but his is of course pretty big. But yeah, I think it's also geographically, I think sort of complementary to X in a way. I mean, X is mostly like a Western developed world product. Of course, it's big in emerging markets, but Telegram is much bigger. Like 80% of Telegram's user base will sit in what we could consider emerging markets. And also it looks sometimes a bit, Asian maybe for the Western eye, right? Which again is due to the fact that it's built for a global audience and the majority of people actually live in Asia. And but it's a much more feature-rich experience than something like a WhatsApp or Signal, right? And Signal, you can argue, is maybe better from a privacy perspective, but again, I wouldn't let perfect be the enemy of the good, right? Signal won't scale in Africa, right? I mean, have you ever lost your phone and redo it? Like and people still, have like, they don't have iPhones there, right? And so I think it will evolve. I think it will evolve also into video a lot. I mean, as you know, ByteDance has been pretty successful with TikTok, right? And there's no reason why you couldn't do short form video on Telegram. It's already kind of happening. And it also will, of course, evolve. I think it is at the forefront with Ton inside it, right? I mean, it's the first one that has blockchain inside it. And actually, it's the biggest one that has it, right? I mean, so Telegram is number 6 in the world in terms of number of users. Let's go through the other 5 and ask the question, which of them have integrated blockchain? You got WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, not allowed yet, or let's see what happens. And 2 Chinese ones, right? Tencent WeChat, ByteDance TikTok, also not allowed. So then it's the biggest, right? And so this is why this is such a big deal. And so Telegram is not sort of playing in the world of Ethereum and Solana, or it's like Meta and Tencent. And so this is also, I think, from our perspective, maybe an interesting stock to look at. It probably wouldn't be a Max 7 stock, but maybe 15 or 20. It would be a big, big thing. And this is not the only one that is, basically allows public equity exposure to this. So what I would say is that, I would just bet on Pavel. I think, he is going to be with AI as well. I mean, there were, again, a few exchanges in the public sphere with Elon. But let's just say that there's more, more companies that are trying to build very large LLMs than companies that have 1 billion users, right? And Zuckerberg's not going to help any other AI player or any other stablecoin player for that matter. He's kind of going to do his own thing, right? So now if you want access to what is the world's largest open distribution, which is Telegram, whether you're a stablecoin player or an AI player, kind of talk to Pavel. And even if you're Elon Musk, you have to talk to Pavel, right? And so I think it's going to be really exciting to see. Reddit has been quite interesting, right? It's turned out to be a treasure trove. Look at the stock. Maybe Telegram is also a treasure trove. And there's ways, of course, especially with blockchain and sort of ZK technology to kind of do AI the ethical way and use user data in a way that it's not going to violate privacy.
Cool. Okay, so let's get back onto obviously Ton strategy.
Sure.
Big sort of story, I guess, of the week. What's the sort of plan behind it? What's your sort of broad vision there?
Yeah, I mean, it's not very complicated, luckily. I've known Michael Saylor personally for 4 years. I went to his 100K party this past New Year's in Miami. Wonderful midlife crisis, I thought.
Are there any celebrities you don't know?
Most of them I don't know, no. And I mean, I think even the normal people don't care about Michael Saylor yet, luckily. But and by the way, I really don't want to be famous. I think it's a liability rather than an asset. But I've reluctantly agreed to sort of sacrifice my well-earned privacy for the greater good, right? So my point is, Saylor has, I think, almost accidentally pioneered a new genre, right? The sort of traditional finance Bible of capital allocation, if there is one, is a book called The Outsiders, worth reading. Will Thorndike wrote it. And this is like Buffett kind of stuff, right? And Saylor kind of almost is writing the new version of it in real time, right? I think there's two genius insights there. Number one, this is a permanent capital vehicle, right? And unlike an ETF, where if you sell the ETF sells the coin. Here you sell the stock, coin stays, coin doesn't move. Stock can go down, right? But like coin doesn't move, right? And what it means is you can trade at a premium or discount, but it can do something about that. You can issue stock or buy back stock in, of course, not Bitcoin, but in our world or in Ethereum and Solana's world, you can stake it. And you can also be included in the index. The ETF can do none of these things, right? And secondly, there just so happens to be still 100 times more capital in the world or so that can buy equities versus buying coin. And that seems to be true even for Bitcoin and ETH and Sol, right? And so whatever the true number is, you can add 1 0 probably for TON, right? As we discussed. So scarcity premium, anyone? Now, secondly, I think Saylor realized that this is a race. This is a winner takes most game. The scale economies in especially raising capital, and especially at the cost of the capital you can raise it, is so compelling. It's like a network effect, which is like liquidity and scale, that it's the winner takes most. Now, doesn't mean the number two can't perform well, but I don't think the number two in Bitcoin can catch up with Saylor, who's 30 times bigger, right? Now, again, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Tom Lee at Bitmine has, I think, outdone Saylor at being Saylor, right? I mean, Saylor has outperformed NVIDIA stock in the AI boom, and you gotta decompose the returns. So I think Bitcoin's up like 10, 11x, and Saylor stock is up, MicroStrategy, 30 something x. So only 1/3 of the return has come from the spot. 2/3, the majority, have come from intelligent capital allocation, right? And Bitmine, I think, there has been a compression in the MNAVs just the last couple of weeks, but Ethereum is up 60% or so, and Bitmine stock up over 10x in less than 2 months. So what the F is happening? Now what's happening is that basically the playbook has sort of been evolved, and if you are a well-structured digital asset treasury company, you can grow book value per share in its simplest form by basically issuing stock at a premium to book and buy coin at book, right? It sounds like counterintuitive because, well, it's dilution. Well, yeah, but it's accretion. Like actually, if you run the numbers, right? And it works the other way, right? If you were to trade at a discount to NAV, which will happen at some point, it did happen for MicroStrategy, which is of course the only one we've got data on, you can buy back your stock. If you do that at a discount to book, you basically grow book value per share, right? And so now, in TON, I think not only are we, of course, let's say, moderately more bullish on the underlying, I think, Bitcoin will double, Ethereum will double, right? But that's only a 2x, and you can see the market cap to opportunity here. We think there's a scarcity premium, right? For the reasons we described. And there's also, like, there is no race. In Ethereum, there's a race, right? Bitmine is ahead, but there's Sharplink Gaming, SBET, Joe Lubin, right? There's Ether Machine, and there's, a couple other ones, right? In TON, there is no second best TON treasury company, right? And I would even go further. It took Saylor, right? 5 years to, all the tricks in the book, hodling through the bear market, issuing securities that none of the three of us has ever heard of before. Perpetual preferreds, and to get to 3.5% of the Bitcoin supply. Amazing. And it had a huge impact on Bitcoin. Where would Bitcoin be without Saylor and his disciples? It would be high, but not quite as high, I would guess, right? And I think in Ethereum, there's an impact, right? I would venture to say that there might not be an ecosystem that will have a bigger impact of the digital asset treasury phenomenon or DAT if we execute well. Why? Because we already have more TON coin as percent of supply than Saylor has Bitcoin. And then Bitmine talks about 5% of all ETH would be we'll get there like by Christmas, we can be more aggressive than all these guys. And I think this is kind of so important. I think that it's worth talking about, and maybe also gives an opportunity to US investors to take a look at this, because no one really knows. People have heard of Telegram, but people are not fully understood, especially US retail investors or institutional investors haven't really heard of TON as much. You guys have, of course, given your crypto focus. But of our company, the ticker is VERB, VERB. No one's ever heard of, right? And so this is kind of early. This is day one, and hence, and as you know, like in a bull market, likely the stock will outperform with more volatility, of course. And of course, in a bear market, the opposite might be true. But as long as you have a long-term outlook or a stomach for volatility or both, that's pretty interesting.
So talking of volatility, what happens if, say, the price of Ton goes down 80%, which is done before?
Absolutely, yeah, no, we're prepared. So, and I worry about this not so much for us, but for the ecosystem, because what the wise man does at the beginning, the fool does at the end, right? As long as these companies are trading at a multiple to book, people will create more of these companies. And once you see like B or C kind of not world class, but lesser teams wrapping coin number 75 in a Nasdaq listing with hard financial leverage. I'm not saying we're there yet, but there has been elements of froth, right? It's going to be a problem, right? And so there's at least 3 golden rules. First, this is Charlie Munger, right? Who said the way smart young men like the 3 of us go broke is the 3 L's: ladies, liquor, and leverage. Even ladies and liquor find no hard financial leverage, right? So this is rule number 1. In our case, not even convertibles, right? And number 2, call me old-fashioned, right? But I want revenues minus expenses greater than 0, profitable, right? And here we have a massive advantage over the Bitcoin companies, and that of course not includes Ton specifically as well, but also Solana and Ethereum. Now we have staking, we have native yield, right? The Bitcoin companies don't have that, and I'm not so worried about MicroStrategy, but I do worry about some of the Bitcoin companies not being able to resist the temptation for yield, right, and reach for it in a way that might be haunting them later. And this is again reminds me of the early days of Kingsway. I happen to have built a multi-billion-dollar asset management business from 0, right? And again, scale matters, right? If you've got 10 billion under management, right, and compared to 100 million, you don't have 100 times more cost, but you have 100 times more capital, right? And if you're getting 4 to 5% staking yield, even if you cut in half and cut in half again, which is not quite 80 but 75%, right? You're still profitable, right? I mean, these look, Pavel runs Telegram with 30 people, right? Engineers. It's the most, I think, efficient engineering operation on planet Earth. But you can run a high-quality digital asset treasury company like you can run a high-quality investment business, like with, like 1 person per billion AUM or something like this. And these might be expensive people, but you can pay them in stock, investing long-term, online, eating your own cooking. And so you can keep the cash costs quite low. And I think that's how you protect against it. And yeah, so basically no hard financial leverage, run it properly. And then also third, at some point, maybe, always have some cash. Fiat money tends to be underestimated, especially in the bear market. It's always good to have some, right? It's always good to have a source. So basically, if you follow these 3 rules, right, and let's go through a scenario, the premiums compress, right? Right now, the premiums are 1.5 to 2 times book. They go to 0, 1 times book. They go to negative, 50% discount, right? Which might be the result of an 80% drop in the underlying. So what do? Well, number 1, you could just ride it out and go fly fishing in Alaska, like literally, because you're profitable and you have no debt, right? Yeah, I mean, look at, sometimes the best thing is to do nothing, right? And no problem. Number 2, better idea, you could use your cash reserves to buy back your stock, as we said earlier. And if you do that at a discount, it increases book value per share. Number 3, you could choose to, but not having to, and that's a huge difference. You never want to be a forced seller, but you could choose to sell a little bit of coin gently, especially if the underlying coin market stops being dislocated and sort of liquid, buy back your stock too, right? Also, if you do that at a discount, will be growing book value per share. So my point is you can do this responsibly. Most people might not do that, but that doesn't mean it's true. It's not true. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a bit similar to when we had all these DAOs at the end of like the DeFi summer where they'd build up these huge treasuries, but they're all in their native token. And then if they sold it, they would get stick for selling and the price would go down, but if they hold on, the price was sort of going down anyway, so they ended up like undercapitalized by the end of the
look, I wouldn't do this with an experimental coin, right? As I said, and I would just of course make an argument that Telegram is not an experimental company. It's a real thing. Ton is not an experimental coin either, right? And we have thought about it, right? But again, it's also then important, like how much room is there, right? Like you also don't want to be number 5 dot in a winner takes most game at a still modestly sized ecosystem. My mind, like if anything, you want to be in the winner.
Yeah, I mean, when I sort of like last spoke about, I think it was with Apexi, they sort of highlighted that the sort of 2 main concerns are increasing leverage and also going further down the risk curve in terms of tokens, like i.e. 2 ways of increasing the risk curve.
Yeah.
With Ton, we're looking, I think, roughly like the 27th asset by market cap, although that probably includes stable coins.
The 23rd, yeah, but it's ought to be top 10, and by the way, the fact that Pavel is currently in purgatory in France, which likely will be resolved at some point, is also another upside catalyst, right? We're like 2.5x from the all-time high. Ethereum's kind of already there, right? So yeah. I'd rather I create the treasury company at whatever $3 and change per token than at 820 where it was like a year and a bit ago.
But do you think there's more risk doing it with TON than with Bitcoin?
Yeah, of course. I mean, with the caveat that I'm not sure it's more risky doing it with TON versus the number 75 Bitcoin company that does it, right? And the people are doing it, right? So, and I think again, the staking is something that is, they need to think about. I mean, running a public company is not free, right? And do the math, right? If we have, you can look at our filings. Again, tomorrow will be an AF print, but let's just say we have many hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Toncoin already, right? I mean, you can do what the pipe was and just say it's bigger than that, right? It doesn't take a genius to figure out. And you look at what the native yield is, we will have, I don't know, $30 million of revenues. So, and we're also going to keep cash, and we have a lot of cash already. So my point is like, in that sense, it's not that risky. Now, of course, look, if the underlying is toast, the whole thing is toast, right? So that's the risk you already have, right? But as long as you're past that point, then I think it can be done very, very thoughtfully. And it's also liquid, right? In a way that, I mean, I'm not a trader. Our shares are locked up. We're not even thinking about selling, right? We're going to ride us to the moon or to zero. But like, the reality is, people can sell on a daily basis, right? Which is also why these things have probably become quite popular, right? I mean, the trading liquidity, gentlemen, of BitMine is approaching Apple. I mean, not quite, but like you get what I'm saying, right? And like you wouldn't believe, like Koreans are like all over this stuff suddenly, right? Equity investors, and again, the experience is it's a good thing as well because it's really bridging TradFi and crypto in a way. There's a, I mean, I was involved in helping many leading crypto fintech investors investing in a ton, right? You saw the names, right? But that took, I mean, over whatever 2 years, $400 million was invested, and it was kind of like hand-to-hand combat. We raised that in a month. Like this was an idea a month ago, and now it's $1 billion, unicorn on Nasdaq. Now, granted, it's a balance sheet company, right? But like still, it must be some kind of Guinness World Record, I think.
Yeah. Would you say that treasury companies are allowing some large holders to essentially cash out in a way that they can't just do by just selling their holdings?
Yeah, I think, I mean, look, I'm not here to, how should I say, quoting Buffett, like, you should criticize by category and praising by name, right? I'm not going to single out a single one. But what we would be nervous about, and of course, as Kingsway, by the way, we're also investors in, passive investors in, some of the other ones, right? And what we're nervous about if people put a huge amount of in-kind in and use it as a backdoor way to improve liquidity. So every investor that put in-kind into the TON one voluntarily locked themselves up for 12 months, up to 12 months. And the normal pipe investors who put, and also put a lot of cash. So, and not just in-kind, right? And the investors who put only cash, they're liquid after 30 business days. So that's 12 times shorter, right? So it's structured in a fair way that every just cash investor can sell before everyone else could even think about selling. Now, secondly, of course, again, it's like making a bottle of wine. In order to create the MNAV sort of at a discount for the pipe investors, which is not necessarily necessary, but of course it's helpful. You need to, square that circle somehow, right? If you now have seen examples where people try to put a huge amount of in-kind in, and they have, no sort of special lockup, and maybe egregious, promote structures. I mean, anything that's merged into it is also, I think, a mistake. So, we've learned, I mean, BitMine figured it out, right? That it's much, speed is important, right? And all the SPACs, frankly, I think, there's some notable examples. We're investors in the Athena one. That's been very good. We're investors in Naka. That's been good. That's Bitcoin. But like generally, if you have a SPAC, you lose a lot of time. And we think the common equity pipe in what is called a, sort of clean listed operating business is the way to go. And doing it, especially in a Nasdaq company, very important. It has to be S3 eligible. So they can do an ATM. It's called at the market offering. So we closed our transaction in 3 days and filed for $1 billion at ATM, which means, we can just sell shares in the market gently. It's primary, right? And raise capital. and buy more coin, right? And do it much faster than sort of closing a pipe transaction with a closing a SPAC transaction with a de-SPAC could take many months.
Okay. And how long do you think treasury companies can expect to have premiums to their underlying holdings for?
I think until probably I mean, it depends, right? I think there will be, the market is already starting to discern between the winners and the sort of runner-ups or the tail, I would say. And even for the very large ones, like, I mean, strategy, right? You saw the MNAV compress quite a bit, which, I think is for a number of reasons. I mean, at some points you run into like problems of scale, right? I mean, it's harder for them to double, right? And of course, certain investors, they want to get rich quickly, right? And secondly, I think what maybe if I can make a modest, I know we're all learning, right? I think the mistake that strategy did just recently, they committed to a certain formula and sort of roadmap, and then they changed it. And I think you can do that, but you might also pay the price. I mean, I'm an investor, and I don't like, uncertainty, right? And so I think you got to commit to what you're saying to be doing it. And if you were to change it, you might have to do it a little bit more gracefully and slowly than just putting a statement out, oh, here's a new formula, right? And then look, I think in the next bear market, I think there will be a washout. As I said, what the wise man does at the beginning, the fool does at the end, right? I don't think the boom and bust cycle of crypto is over. I think indeed the DAT phenomenon could well be at the center of the boom and the bust, right? And there will be an extinction event of the, I think, long tail treasury companies. And one of the other reasons I would, and this is where conviction comes in. I mean, you guys have hopefully been through many cycles and you're still here, right? You understand that conviction is kind of a lonely decision at the end of the day, right? And something is falling like a, like a knife. Do you hold it? Do you buy more of it, right? And if you make that decision between you and yourself, that's difficult enough, right? But imagine these boardrooms, right? Suddenly there's like, 5, 6, 7 people, massive principal agent problem, like class action lawsuit. It's like either they're going to press the buttons, sell, or they're going to run for the hills and insurance, right? And so that's going to happen too, right? So we are very high conviction people. Like we're not going to hopefully have that problem, but it's definitely going to be a testing next bear market when these treasury companies start at trading at a big discount, and then I think you see the separation of the survivors, right, and the real ones. Like when the tide goes out, you find out who's been swimming naked, typically.
Amazing. Thanks so much. That was super insightful discussion. We're definitely tracking the treasury trade heavily. We have a lot of charts on our dashboard.
Yeah.
That I'm looking at daily. So yeah, we can see if we can get some Tom ones up shortly.
Yeah, I would be delighted. And look, we are just starting, right? So please, if you want to see something, again, we haven't really launched the website properly yet. We haven't really published the NAV yet, but that's all coming. And look, and we hopefully to be innovating, right? I mean, I think, standing on the shoulders of giants, Saylor, Tom Lee at BitMine. But let's see whether we can improve on the model slightly, right? And not because we're smarter, but because we just have the benefit of being, the canaries in the coal mine are ahead of us, right? And if someone makes a mistake, we'll try to take that on board and not make the same twice. Doesn't mean we're not going to make mistakes. I'm sure we will, but hopefully not the same ones twice. And yeah, most excitingly also this the second role of the treasury company, which is maybe a good place to finish if I've got more time, but the shortcomings in the Ton ecosystem, apart from sort of the capital flywheel that's been missing, especially in the US, has been the sort of telling the story better, both to, of course, the users and the masters at large, but also to the developers, right? And as someone who's run the foundation, I can say with all humility, the foundation is a bit like the government in, the bad sense of the word. It's nonprofit, it's slow, it's bureaucratic, it's, not necessarily designed for attracting and compensating like world-class people like Americans in America who will, build the biggest megaphone for Ton in our case, right? And it's also political, right? Like if you support this one, why not that one, and so forth. Like the treasury company doesn't have that problem. Like it's a private enterprise, right? For profit, unashamedly so. Greed is good, right? You can hire world-class people, pay them really well in stock, right? And build a megaphone that, in our case, will be very much focused on the US, and that's really hasn't been existing. But secondly, also at like Asia Pacific and Korea, right? So you'll see a lot of podcasts with subtitles in Korean. I'm going to go Korean Blockchain Week and of course the token in Singapore, right? And then also address the developer point. So I think that's something where the model can evolve. We haven't even talked about staking yet, right? But that's another interesting idea. So staking is a utility, right? We secure the network, right? Of course, we stake on coins. then why don't we end up owning our own staking infrastructure? As you know, when you're small, you pay away 20% of the gross to net. When you're big, maybe 10% of the gross to net away to a third-party provider. Why don't we keep that in-house? Oh, why don't we do delegated staking, right? I mean, we're not there yet, right? But, it's been discussed, because there's so many other ton holders, they can keep it all in their own custody, but you can do the delegated staking at the listco. Balance sheet with a multiple, profit and loss statement or cash flow statement with a multiple, double that, right? Why don't we do our own stablecoin? I mean, Circle is trading pretty well in the public markets, right? I mean, again, I can't promise this happens. And if it happens, I can't promise that it happens through our listco, but, I'll make sure that I work for the common stockholder. Imagine $1,000, right, in your bank account. Not an instant amount of money, right? Even across the average demographic of the average Telegram user, right? There's rich people, there's poor people, right? But $1,000 in your bank account times 1 billion people is $1 trillion AUM business, 3% net interest margin, 30 billion of cash flow a year. Even if you pay half of that to Telegram, which you would, like Circle, Coinbase, 15 billion of cash flow a year. Maybe there's a $300 billion company here. We're at one, right? Anyway, this is my parting gift.
Cool. All right.
You are not punishing.
That's all we have time for today, I'm afraid. I want to thank Manny for joining this episode and Kelvin for co-hosting. As a reminder, Newsroom works tirelessly to get you accurate, informed crypto news. If you want to stay ahead, read the blog. Thanks, and see you next time.
Thanks so much, gentlemen. Really appreciate the distinguished audience.